Here's your host, Dennis Rimmer.
And here we are in a new year, 2025, talking with an old buddy, because we've talked to Ron before. Ron Bass is with us. He's a former newspaper and magazine journalist and a movie critic. Over 20 novels he's written, 2 novellas, 4 nonfiction books. And today, of course, we're discussing the latest in the Priscilla Tempest mysteries. This is book number 4. And before I mention the title, Ron, can I say, is it Savoy or Savoy?
Savoy, the Hotel Savoy.
Hotel Savoy.
It's a pleasure to be back with you.
Thank you. Curse of the Savoy.
Curse of the Savoy.
Which is a famous hotel in London, England. Is it still in operation, by the way?
Oh, very much so, yeah. It's been around since 1898. It's an iconic hotel in London. I was there having lunch a couple of, I guess about 4 months ago now. So it's still very much there. It still prides itself in absolute luxury and elegance, or being the final word in luxury and elegance. But I don't think it sees the kind of celebrities it used to in the heyday. In the late 60s, I'd like to think of as when the novels are set, it really wasn't its heyday. Anybody who was, or everybody who was anybody, came to the Savoy in those days, which makes it very fertile ground for writing these books. I don't get the impression it's as quite as a celebrity, or attracts quite the numbers of celebrities it used to. But it's still a very, very elegant, albeit, and of course, a very, very expensive hotel in London.
Right. And it's The Curse of the Savoy, the 4th Priscilla Tempest mystery book. But before we proceed, Ron, I have to extend our condolences on behalf of myself and all the reading community and publishing community. So your writing partner, Prudence Emery, passed away a while ago. Is that right?
Yes. Well, it's a year. It'll be a year. It was a year in January.
Oh.
No, it's just coming up to a year. Seems like I still am tempted to call Prudence and find out which way you turn when you go on the Strand in London. But unfortunately, I can't do it. But she was a character in herself. What made the novels so much fun to write with her was the fact that she'd worked there in the time period where the novels are set in the late 60s, and she was in fact the press representative at the Savoy, and like our plucky heroine, Priscilla Tempest, Prudence met everybody and rubbed shoulders with everybody and knew everybody back in those days, everybody from Noel Coward to Paul McCartney. So it was a tremendous asset having her along to write these novels. And when we first talked about doing it, she said, I've never written a mystery novel. And I said at the time, well, I've never stayed at the Savoy, so we'll make a perfect couple.
Perfect
we'll make
timing.
a perfect team.
Yes.
So and we did. But,
yeah. Now, this one, the latest one, Curse of the Savoy, was it written after her demise, or were you in the process?
She was ill at the time. She was a little more... The third novel... Princess of the Savoy, she was much less present for because she just wasn't well.
Right.
What was so surprising about her untimely death last year is that I thought she was getting better. She still had serious health issues, and she was in a wheelchair, and she was getting care at a lovely assisted facility residence. But she was quite sharp and quite willing to, participate in at least advising on the writing and the plot points and the characters and the truth of the novel, I guess.
Right.
but so she was, as I say, she was a little more involved in this book, but she certainly will be missed. I knew her for so long. She came back here after 6 years of working at the Savoy. She just couldn't take it anymore. Not that they treated her badly, but they treated her too well. It was too many parties, too many late nights, too much champagne, too many lovers. She just decided she had to come back to a quieter Canada. So she ended up being a very, very popular and very, very busy, and this is when I got to know her in the 70s and 80s, as a unit film publicist. So she did all sorts of movies here, and as I say, was very much in demand for it, and had, again, seemed to meet everybody and know everybody.
So we're assuming that the Priscilla Tempest is kind of based on Prudence Emery's life?
Well, as I say, you don't have to go too far away from Priscilla to get to Prudence. Now, she kind of denied that, or was hesitant to embrace that picture too much, but it's pretty close. She certainly was the inspiration for the novels. Again, we just worked out so well. I in a million years, I would never have written a novel about the Savoy if it hadn't been for Prudence. So,
right.
As I say, and if I needed a role model for that character, she was certainly there, very much available. But the only difference really was that Prudence didn't solve any mysteries.
No,
at least none that she would admit to. Put it that way.
But Priscilla Tempest does solve mysteries. Now, this one, the fourth book, Curse of the Savoy. Again, it's a list of name dropping. We've got Alfred Hitchcock, Cary Grant. Now, there's Christine Keeler is involved, and some people might not remember. She was sort of a femme fatale, party girl, and John Profumo was involved with her somehow, and that led to his downfall. And way back when.
Well, she was. John Profumo was having an affair with Christine Keeler, and this was the scandal of the, as you may remember, Dennis.
Yeah.
She was the scandal of the early 60s, at a time when sex could get you into much bigger trouble than it seems to get you into now.
No.
But she was having an affair with John Profumo, who was in the Harold Macmillan cabinet, very, very prominent, and was probably going to be the next prime minister. She was having an affair with him at the same time as she was having an affair with a Russian naval attaché attached to London.
Yeah.
And of course, it was at the height of the Cold War, so you can imagine the horrors that ensued when it was discovered and became public that she was having this affair. And of course, it just roiled the Conservative government at the time, and resulted in them losing the election. And Profumo was ousted, and it was a real mess. So she does show up. It's a few years later in Curse of the Savoy, but she does show up, and she's a character in the book. And that's what makes these books so much fun, is that you can use characters like Christine Keeler. Cary Grant plays a rather romantic part in Curse of the Savoy, and it just, to me, it just adds a little more je ne sais quoi to the whole enterprise. And really, so many, as I said earlier, so many celebrities did show up at the Savoy that if you didn't use that aspect of it, you would really, I think, rob the hotel and the books of one of their major reasons for being at the time. Right. So it's great fun using these celebrities. In many cases, obviously neither Prudence or I knew Christine Keeler, but in many cases, either I as a journalist had interviewed them, or in Prudence's case, as a publicist, she had met them. So we, between the two of us, brought a certain amount of, for want of a better phrase, inside knowledge to some of the people that are in the books.
And it's always fun as a reader to do this because we've heard of these people before, but then we're kind of vicariously living, even if it's a fictional kind of life, we're kind of with these people at the same time. And we're going, oh, wow, that's swell. I wish I'd known this person and things like that.
Yeah, as I say, I'm sorry to interrupt you, Des.
Yep.
I'm glad to hear it. Now, if you don't know who the characters are, it can also work because, all right, you don't know who Christine Keeler is, but through the book you get to know that she's a notorious party. In her case, she's the notorious Christine Keeler, scandalous young woman. You know that. Well, you may not know who Cary Grant is, but you know that it's this famous movie star staying at the Savoy. So if you do know the names, I think it just adds a little extra to the reading of the books. But if you don't know, they're still hopefully fast-paced, page-turning reads involving interesting characters.
Exactly, and that's what we want as a reader.
Oh, absolutely. Yep. Prudence and I, our number one thing, our number one inclination, if you will, was to get you to turn the next page and wondering what's going to happen next, because I think that's the essence of these novels. So, our ambition was to do that.
And I think you've succeeded in spades, as they say, across the pond in Jolly Old and stuff like that.
Thank you.
It's a right cracking yarn. So.
Well, thank you. Yes, as I say, that's the intention. As we said from the get-go that we wanted these to be entertainments.
Right.
With a lot of humor in the books. There's somewhat tongue-in-cheek. We are at once enthralled by the luxury and the glamour and the scandal of what's going on, but we look at it with a somewhat jaundiced eye, and I think that sums up both our feelings to the luxury, the glamour, and the celebrities.
Now, back to Christine Keeler for a moment. I remember as a young lad, let's see, that would be, I was just like in junior high school kind of age. So this was still kind of racy stuff to hear all about.
Very
this.
racy for the time, absolutely.
Yes.
And she was gorgeous. I mean, she's a beautiful woman, and she was also hooked up with who doesn't show up in the book, a young woman named Mandy Rice Davies.
Oh, yes.
And so between the two of them and Mandy Rice Davies, Christine Keeler was a kind of elegant brunette, but Mandy Rice Davies was this sort of voluptuous, sexy blonde. So between Christine Keeler and Mandy Rice Davies, it certainly drew you to the papers every day to find out what was going on.
Right. Now, was Goethe Munsinger, was that affair in Canada around the same time?
I think that, boy, you dredge up an old. That was kind of a as Canadian scandals go. We seem to, our idea of a Canadian scandal is discovering that Jean Chrétien had help from his neighbor in building the deck.
Yes.
So Christine Munsinger, I just forget the details of that, but I don't think it amounted to the same level as the Christine Keeler thing. But I think that came afterwards. I think it came afterwards. But
that's just my quirky brain said. Oh, I said Christine Keeler. I keep going back to this. Well, that reminds me of Goethe Munsinger. Like boom, just like that.
Exactly. And you know what? That's about the only sex scandal we've had in Canada that I can think of, at least in my lifetime. So we, as I say, we usually get upset that the government has spent too much money or
not enough.
Somebody took a free. We get angry because the Prime Minister gets a free trip to the Bahamas or something.
Right.
I mean, it's our idea
So, Curse of the
scandal.
Ron Bass is with us. Curse of the Savoy, the fourth in this series of Priscilla Tempest mysteries and fun and games at the Savoy in London, England. Now, with the passing of Prudence Emery, are you able to continue the series on your own?
Well, Dennis, you're asked the tough questions right off the top. I am prepared to go forward with the books one way or another. We'll see what our beloved publisher Douglas and McIntyre wants to do. So far, the Curse of the Savoy, I'm not sure when your show is running, but it will be available after February the 25th, at the end of the month.
Yeah.
So we'll see how it does, and we'll see where Douglas and McIntyre wants to go. But I would be the rights to the first novel, Death at the Savoy, were sold to a couple of Hollywood producers. I'm not sure where they are at with the with what they want to do with it. And the fires in Los Angeles certainly wouldn't have helped anything lately.
No.
But so we'll see. Right now, everything's somewhat up in the air. But we'll see. We'll get Curse of the Savoy out there, and with your help, I'm sure it will become a national bestseller.
At least,
so,
if not international.
I mean, on your podcast, how can it possibly fail?
Exactly. Yes, you're right. Yes. Yep. That's true. Exactly. So, getting back to your life and times, Ron Bass, what made you, way back when you were in high school or earlier, want to be a writer?
Well, I've got a story that I tell, and I think it's true, so that makes it helpful. I was sick a lot as a kid, and again, without much television back then, and obviously no internet, no smartphones, none of that. I just entertained myself. I drew a lot, and I wrote stories, and my memory is that I was. And I was quite interested in politics even as a kid. And, I was growing up in Brockville, Ontario, on the St. Lawrence River. And John Diefenbaker came to town, who was, I don't think he was in power at the time. I think he was trying to get back into power.
Uh-huh.
And the local auditorium where he was speaking, and everybody seemed to show up for political events in those days, particularly somebody like Diefenbaker, who was quite an iconic figure in Canadian politics even then. And so we all trooped over to the Brockville Civic Center, and I was sitting in the balcony, and before the show started, before the Diefenbaker appeared, suddenly this line of somewhat sketchy-looking men, they were all men, walked across the stage, and they seemed to be badly dressed. They seemed to have a sort of insouciance about them, and who were these guys? And I said to somebody next to me, who are those guys? And the person next to me said, "They're reporters."
And they were probably smoking cigarettes, too. Whoa.
And I thought to myself, these guys look like mavericks. These guys look like they don't take any guff from anybody. I'd like to be one of those guys.
Right.
And I'm sure that's where it started. And I was fortunate enough to get a job first at the local weekly newspaper, and I can't believe in retrospect, I always shake my head and say, I can't believe I did this. But I took my clippings from the weekly newspaper and into the Recorder and Times, which was a very good daily newspaper in Brockville. And I took it to the managing editor, and I showed him, and he hired me. He hired me to write a youth column for the Brockville Recorder and Times. And I was very fortunate. It was I guess the mid-'60s. And very much youth culture. Everybody was concerned about youth and youth culture, hippies, and all this stuff that was starting to go on, the Beatles and all. That was changing everything. So they hired me to write a local youth column, and they liked that, and I got a job as a summer reporter, and I was. I think about 16 years of age, and I was going out and writing daily, covering daily stories for the paper. I remember Pierre Trudeau ended up being the prime minister, but there was a Liberal candidates race going on, and a guy named Wallace McCutcheon came to town, and he's totally forgotten today, but at that point he was running for the Liberal leadership. And the guy that was supposed to go over and interview him from the Recorder and Times turned up sick or disappeared and did something, and they looked at me and they said, I was the only reporter in the office, so they said, Bass, get over there to the Revere Hotel and interview Wallace McCutcheon. And so I looked at the files, found out about who this guy was, and went over there and knocked on the door. The door opened, and one of McCutcheon's assistants was there. And remember, I'm 16. I'm this pimply-faced, skinny kid walking in to interview the guy that hoped to be the next Prime Minister of Canada. And Wallace McCutcheon, as I remember, he looked like the quintessential Canadian politician with the white hair and the carefully trimmed mustache and pinstriped navy suit. And we sat, and I knew enough to ask the right questions, and he was quite articulate and talked. And what amazed me at the time, and this was true of everything, but particularly in this case, nobody blinked an eye. Nobody said, what's this pimply-faced, gangly teenager doing interviewing the guy who's going to be the next Prime Minister of Canada? Nobody said a word. And that was true of the whole time I was a teenager at the Recorder and Times. Everybody just, it's the guy that's going to interview me, so what? And I never thought about that until years later, and I look back on it and I thought, God, it's amazing. And even my parents would say, well, I would say, I just interviewed a candidate for the Liberal leadership today, Mom. Yeah, but do you have your homework done?
Right. I don't care. Get in there and clean up your room.
So that was the start of it. It was, as I've said many, many times, it was my magic carpet ride out of small town Canada. I never got beyond grade 10 in high school, but I got a tremendous education after I left Brockville, and just as you pointed out earlier, ended up at the Toronto Star as the movie critic after having been at the Sunday. Was there when the Sunday Sun in Toronto started up. I was at Maclean's magazine for a number of years, a contributing editor. Worked for a lot as a freelancer. Worked for a lot of all the major newspapers, the Washington Post to the Los Angeles Times. I did freelance stories for just about every major publication in the States, including Cosmopolitan magazine.
Wow.
So it was. Yep. So as I say, just that very fortuitous hiring at the Recorder and Times just opened up a lifetime of really great adventures and meeting people obviously you'd never meet in a million years otherwise. And it was a good thing too, because Dennis, I can't do anything else. It's all I can do. If I had failed at this, I'd probably be interviewing me in a prison somewhere.
Oh, well,
if you would even talk to me.
So, just a couple more questions here for Ron Bass. We're talking about The Curse of the Savoy. And this is book number 4 in the Priscilla Tempest Mysteries. Now, how hard is it to sustain sort of the same character through regular books and the same sort of tone one after the other? When people come to the first one, like it, they want more in the second one, they like that, they want more. How do you keep that ball rolling?
Well, that's actually a very good question that I have not been asked before. I think there's just on my part, and it's sort of with Prudence, she was somewhat the guiding light that could get me back on track if I got off track. But I've always had in mind this kind of novel. I mean, it's the kind of movie that I was intrigued by as a kid. Charade with Cary Grant. It Takes the Thief, the Alfred Hitchcock movie, again with Cary Grant. That these mysteries that were kind of light, sexy, and cleverly written, clever dialogue, particularly in Charade. And those movies always sort of intrigued me. And again, I often think that with these books, I'm kind of reliving my childhood. The glamour that I envisioned sitting there in the theater watching Grace Kelly and Cary Grant. I sort of never lost that, I still love to go to the south of France, to the Riviera, and sort of, and I always think, I'm this kid from Brockville, and here I am on the Riviera, so I don't lose, I think, that gee whiz, entirely fake glamour of these movies, but that was wonderful in Technicolor, and Prudence and I were probably very old-fashioned in thinking this way, but it's certainly what we brought to the first novel, and all I have to do is revisit my childhood to keep up the flavor, to keep up the humor, keep finding ways to get Priscilla into more trouble, and in the process have fun writing them. I know I'm supposed to be, the struggling writer and writer's block and all this stuff, but it's. I'll only admit it to you, Dennis, and don't tell anybody else. But it makes it fun. Now, all the other stuff, dealing with publishers, trying to get some publicity, trying to blah, blah, all this other stuff, that brings you back down to earth. Reviews, all the other stuff, the stuff that comes, the baggage that comes along with writing a novel. For anybody writing a novel, that brings you down to earth pretty quickly. But sitting here in my little office, I'm in fact not here. I'm at the Savoy Hotel. There are beautiful women nearby. The food is exquisite. If I decide I want to change something, I can immediately change it. I'm the guy that's in command. I've got all the power. Then I stop writing, and Dennis, reality hits again.
Reality hits, yes. Reality bites, as they say.
Reality bites, exactly.
Okay. A couple more questions.
But while you're away at the Savoy, it's great fun.
A couple more questions, Ron.
Sure.
I have to wrap it up. First of all, how do I convince my wife to let me take her to the south of France?
I don't know that you would have to convince. I certainly don't. My wife Kathy is a Francophile to the nth degree, and she loves to travel, and we love to go to the south of France. So she kind of drags me along, and her French is much better than mine. So,
yes.
So just tell her that Ron Bass and his wife Kathy are urging. It's Diane, I think, is your wife's name.
That's right. Yeah.
Tell her that they're both encouraging her to go to the south of France with you.
Yeah, I went to Monte Carlo in late August, early September of 1978, and it's the most beautiful place on earth in my mind. And I want to go back, and I keep hammering away at her. So we'll see what happens.
All that section of the Riviera is my idea. The Cap Ferrat onto Monte Carlo is the Grace Kelly, Cannes to a certain extent, the Carlton Hotel and all that stuff.
Yep.
Is my idea of the Riviera, and it still maintains. Even certainly Monte Carlo still maintains that old-fashioned glamour that, as they say, it's out of style to a certain extent now, but it's still there. And so get Diane and get on a plane and go to the south of France.
You bet. And one more, Ron, before we wrap it up. What is a Bucks Fizz?
Well, it's really, as I learned, I don't drink anymore, but it's to my horror, I discovered that it sounds so great, but it's really just champagne and orange juice.
Oh, okay.
But at the Savoy and interestingly enough, the last time we were there, as I was saying earlier, a few months ago, at the American Bar, which plays a big role in the books, and it's this iconic bar in the Savoy. My wife, Kathy, ordered a Bucks Fizz, and they didn't know what it was.
I guess that's a mimosa these days, right?
It's a mimosa, yes,
Okay.
or champagne or orange juice, right.
Right. Okay, Ron, thank you very much. It's been a pleasure. This is all about The Curse of the Savoy, the Priscilla Tempest Mystery, book number 4. And let's hope there's many more to come.
Oh, well, thank you so much, Dennis. Great pleasure talking to you. Hope we can do it again.
Thank you for visiting with us today. This is Talking Books and Stuff with Dennis Rimmer. Contact him at dennis@talkingbooks.tk. Thank you, and may all the good news be yours. Oh, and don't forget to check out his book, The Great Canadian Notebook, available across Canada and at amazon.ca.